We begin with breaking developments out of the Middle East, where it has been a day of missiles, mullahs, and mixed messages, ending with one side making a full-blown declaration of peace. Good evening, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. Less than an hour ago, President Trump posted on Truth Social, "Congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire." The president outlined a staggered timetable in which first Iran and then Israel will pause military operations and hopefully end what the president is calling the 12-day war. The president concluded his post in a quasi-kumbaya spirit, writing, "God bless Israel, God bless Iran, God bless the Middle East, God bless the United States of America, and God bless the world." Now, it's important to note here that neither Israel nor Iran have confirmed this. Still, you optimists out there can officially file this under huge if true. And though it's much too early to say for sure, it is entirely possible that Operation Midnight Hammer this past weekend may turn out to be one of the most successful American military operations ever, surpassing perhaps even the bin Laden mission. We have live team coverage of all the breaking news tonight. Joe Khalil is in Washington, D.C. Robert Sherman is in Tel Aviv. Brian Enton is in Doha, Qatar. But we begin tonight with Joe Khalil on Capitol Hill because that's where the latest news is. Joe, what are you hearing from the White House about this ceasefire?
So they're not trying to get ahead of President Trump. They said that the message speaks for itself. What's interesting, Elizabeth, is that from the beginning of the day today, we went from President Trump discussing potential regime change to Iran is now retaliating militarily against a United States base, to at the end of the day now this announcement of a ceasefire. I don't think anybody had that spectrum of events all happening in a matter of hours, yet here we are. The last that we spoke to officials in the White House today, we were asking whether President Trump was actually putting pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu to try to end this war, to try to come to the negotiating table as President Trump and White House officials had been urging both Israel and Iran to do. The answer we got was that the president isn't necessarily pressuring one side or another, but he had made clear consistently that since the beginning of this conflict, all 12 days of it, that the president hadn't changed his position. It must end with a negotiated ceasefire agreement that turns into a longer-lasting peace and an end to the nuclear program within Iran. That seems to be the path that they are headed on right now, Elizabeth. Now, what's very interesting, how this all developed earlier in the day, President Trump himself confirmed that that attack from Iran on an American base was done actually by telegraphing beforehand through back channels, Iranian messaging to the United States, warning that it would happen. That sort of provided an off-ramp, but we should make sure and caveat here that both Israel and Iran have yet to say anything publicly about this ceasefire. Neither side so far has agreed to it. What we have here is what President Trump is saying. So again, Elizabeth, a lot happening in just a short time here, but it does appear, at least for now, pending any unforeseen changes here, that President Trump is heading into NATO, a conference tomorrow, with a ceasefire agreement here between Israel and Iran potentially on the table.
All right, we will wait to hear. That is a really big, it's a huge development if true. But that quick key question is, what about Israel? Did Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu agree to this ceasefire? Remember, the Israelis have insisted they must destroy the Iranian nuclear facilities and nuclear enrichment plans. It all comes as the IDF, of course, is expanding its targets beyond nuclear facilities today, striking a notorious prison and even Tehran's destruction of Israel countdown clock. Let's bring in NewsNation's Robert Sherman, who's live on the ground in Tel Aviv. I know, Robert, that the spokesman for the IDF refused to comment on this reported ceasefire. Are we hearing anything from the Prime Minister, who was meeting with his cabinet tonight?
Yeah, nothing public is coming out of Jerusalem at this hour, Elizabeth, when it comes to either confirming or denying this ceasefire here. But there are a few movements that are happening on the ground here that I'd like to point to. I mean, you read the president's statement in which he said that there will first that Iran will start the ceasefire upon the 12th hour. Israel will start the ceasefire, but that they are both undertaking their final missions. There are a few movements that are ongoing right now. We just had alerts in the Golan Heights a few moments ago. We have heard jets rumbling overhead, and a new round of evacuation orders was just issued by the IDF a few minutes ago for areas of Tehran. And to put that context into this, Elizabeth, is that you mentioned the objective of knocking out nuclear sites. There is another objective that the Israelis have: ballistic missile sites, which is something that we heard that the Israeli government say publicly today that they wouldn't stop their operations until they felt as though that they had diminished Iran's capabilities to fire ballistic missiles into Israeli airspace to a sufficient level that it no longer poses a threat. It is our understanding that those are some of the operations that the Israelis have been conducting here throughout the day that we have already seen. And now you see this new round of evacuation orders taking place here, the Israelis taking on a few more operations, apparently, before this ceasefire comes into effect, assuming all of this ends up proving to hold in the end here.
And do we expect the Prime Minister, Robert, to make any sort of public announcement tonight?
Jerusalem is very quiet right now, Elizabeth, not giving any indication of public comment coming out from the Prime Minister at this point, but that's always subject to change.
All right, Robert Sherman, keep us posted. Let us know if you hear anything, and we'll go right back to you. Joining us right now, in the meantime, is retired General Joseph Votel. He served as commander of U.S. Central Command, or CENTCOM, which is responsible for all the military operations in the Middle East and, frankly, beyond the Middle East. But it's the Middle East we're talking about tonight. General, I just want to get your reaction to this announcement just moments ago, really, from President Trump of a complete and total ceasefire to begin, I guess, and now it would be 5 hours. Operation Midnight Hammer might have been what did this.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. It's good to be with you again. Yeah, I think it's been an extraordinary day when you kind of think back on the journey that we've all been on today. In the wake of our strikes, response from the Iranians and continued operations by the Israelis, and now this announcement that, if true, I think would be an important development. And certainly, I think it's proper to say that our strikes on Saturday night certainly had a big impact on the Iranians, and I think have really brought them to the table, so to speak, and begin to think that there has to be a different approach than the one that they're currently on.
You know this region so well. Iran has never been weaker than it is right now.
That's right, and largely as a result of the work of the Israeli Defense Forces, not just over the last 10 or 12 days, but really over the last 10 or 12 months, where they have taken many of the key proxies, the Hezbollah, Hamas, a number of the Shia militia groups in Iraq and Syria, really have addressed those threats, and of course have gone directly after Iran's war-making capabilities, their ability to launch missiles, their ability to defend themselves, and a variety of their ability to command and control. So, yeah, Iran, once the hegemon of the region, is no longer in that position this evening.
President Trump, you just referenced the attack, and I'm putting it in quotes for a reason, by Iran on that U.S. military base in Qatar today. They gave Qatar and the U.S. military, therefore, a heads up that the attack was coming. It appears to have been nothing more than something symbolic and face-saving enough. I mean, in essence, Iran blinked here, right?
Well, yeah, I think they were trying to do that. That said, I would just remind people that these were 14 ballistic missiles. Each carried about 1,500 pounds of explosive weight. If they'd made it through, they could have done some real damage on the ground. And it took a significantly coordinated effort between the United States military and the military of the state of Qatar to shoot all those down. So, yeah, I get that they signaled this all to us, and that probably was their intent. But I I don't think we should diminish the fact that there were 14 ballistic missiles fired at a U.S. base in the Middle East that could have caused casualties and a lot of damage to our facilities.
So were the Iranians counting on us to intercept those missiles?
I believe they were. I think they respect our capabilities, and I think they were intending that we, and probably hoping that we would, because I don't think they're looking for another round of retaliation from the United States.
So how long will it take for us to know exactly how much damage the United States inflicted on Iran's nuclear program with our huge bombing this weekend? Nobody's been in on the ground. We don't for sure know, right?
Right. You know, we've certainly heard the initial assessments here, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the secretary talked about this yesterday during their Pentagon briefing, and I think they both were pretty conservative in terms of their estimates. I mean, the initial reports are very positive in terms of creating a lot of destruction. We know where those bombs hit. They were delivered very precisely on key locations at these nuclear weapons locations, and so we can assess, and we know that they operated as designed, and we know what they're capable of, so we can draw some conclusions from that. And certainly there's been some intelligence out there. We're all looking at the imagery that's being produced, but there's more intelligence that we're collecting as well. Signals intelligence tells us what people are saying,
Right.
Open source intelligence, a variety of other things, and that collectively will help us really form a much more fulsome assessment of the damage that we've done. But we do need someone on the ground, someone to go in and see exactly what happened.
Right. As spectacularly executed as Midnight Hammer was, we don't know even now how much damage, whether it's a significant or a complete obliteration of the nuclear program we have managed to inflict. This was the first time that the bunker-busting bombs were ever used in combat. They were designed precisely for this scenario. How did they do?
Well, it appears that they did pretty well. They're delivered with a kind of world-class aircraft, the B-2 bomber, and really some very skilled pilots who are delivering those munitions. So, by all accounts, looks like all 14 that we dropped there went to the locations they were intended to go to, and then operated on the ground or in the ground in the manner in which we had thought they would. So they operated pretty well. And again, I would commend our military commanders and United States Air Force and these pilots and a variety of others who,
for doing a great job.
Had a role in this.
Very quick question. The Ayatollah and his senior leaders are all now reportedly hiding in bunkers underground in Iran. The Ministry of Intelligence has ordered that nobody can use cell phones or electronic devices to communicate with each other. How is this regime running right now? I mean, they're basically using couriers.
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly not optimum, and I think it really does describe some of the challenges they've had responding to this. I mean, they can launch missiles, they can do some other things, but in terms of orchestrating a coherent defense, they're really got an arm or two tied behind their back here because they can't come up, they can't communicate effectively. So, the command and control has been diminished, just like the overall military capabilities have been diminished, largely because of the offensive capabilities of the Israeli Defense Forces.
General Joseph Votel, thank you so much. Great to have you on. I really appreciate your expertise. All right, coming up for us, Brian Enton is live in Doha, Qatar, as the region reacts to President Trump's ceasefire announcement. We'll go live there next. Plus, I'll speak to a retired Air Force commander who worked at the very base that was targeted in today's Iranian missile attacks. Why he says the bases in the region are still, even now, on high alert. So we have a possible ceasefire. That is the news from President Trump tonight. Some might say it's a stunning turn of events. Just hours ago, Iran lobbed more than a dozen missiles at America's biggest military base in the Middle East. But how stunning is it really? For the discerning, that missile attack could have been read as a signal a ceasefire was actually possible. Consider the position of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. as he was in with the position he was in as he tried to thread an extremely narrow needle. On the one hand, he couldn't do nothing in response to this weekend's massive American bombing. The Iranian people and propaganda machine demanded something be done. On the other hand, any something of significance was almost certain to result in more American airstrikes. The Ayatollah must have been wondering if the next bunker to be busted could be the one in which he's hiding to stay in power. The solution? Something that was really a nothing. Firing missiles at a U.S. air base in Qatar, the largest American base in the region, by the way, that sounded defiant and brazen, at least at first. But as we now know, Iran gave the Americans early notice of the attack, so there were no casualties, according to President Trump. This video shows the moment when those short-range and medium-range missiles from Iran lit the skies in Doha, Qatar. They were all headed for the Al Udeid air base, home to 10,000 American troops. Nearly all of those missiles were intercepted, with no reports of damage or of casualties. After the attack, President Trump wrote on Truth Social, quote, "Iran has officially responded to our obliteration of their nuclear facilities with a very weak response, which we expected, and have very effectively countered." He added, most importantly, they've gotten it all out of their system, and there will hopefully be no further hate. That followed a statement from Iran's supreme leader, who wrote, quote, "We did not attack anyone. We do not accept anyone's attack, and we will not surrender to anyone's attack." Still, in the hall of mirrors that is Middle East politics, this missile attack on American air bases could qualify as an Iranian olive branch. If so, it was one President Trump quickly accepted. NewsNation's Brian Enton is live in Doha tonight. And Brian, we know those missiles didn't kill any Americans. What exactly did they do?
Yeah, so there were 19 of them, Elizabeth, and 18 of the 19 were shot down by the missile defense systems here in Qatar that are part of the Qatari government and also U.S. Defense systems. You mentioned it, about 20 miles behind me is that massive U.S. military base, the biggest in the Middle East, about 10,000 soldiers. So certainly this could have been much, much worse. They just reopened the airspace here in Qatar. Much of it, certainly, as you elaborated on, felt very performative. Felt like almost like a plan. That we landed actually right when they closed the airspace here in Doha, so we were the last flight to get in. So Qatar clearly had some kind of heads up. They knew to close their airspace down, and it was just a couple of hours later. I actually shot with my cell phone when we saw the missiles up overhead. Most of them were actually the air defense missiles coming from the U.S. base going back towards Iran, but we did see a couple actually going from the direction of Iran into the base. But thankfully, no one hurt, and we're told there's just very, very minor damage at the base. Elizabeth?
All right, Brian Enton reporting live from Doha. Thank you. My next guest served as an Air Force commander at the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar following the 9/11 terror attacks. Retired General Charles Chuck Wald, also the former deputy commander of the U.S. European Command. General, great to have you here. So you know this base well that Iran attacked this afternoon. It's the biggest one in the Middle East. 10,000 troops are stationed there. It makes it a big target.
Yeah, it's a big target. It's very close. It's just across the North Arabian Sea, or the Persian Gulf, if you want to call it that. So less than 250 miles or so. So it's a big target. It's a lucrative target, and but it's also very well defended, as we saw today. 18 out of 19 of the missiles were shot down. It's very hardened. They have a lot of aircraft, hard aircraft shelters and underground tunnels for moving around the base. So it's a great base. It's most of the assets the aircraft had left before this attack today. I think it, first of all, it's important that the Iranians are talking about stopping the fighting, but it's kind of cynical that they would fire missiles at a base today and pre-announce it to the United States that nobody gets hurt, just so they can prove there are people there. They still have some fight in them, but it's a good move, and I think it's a good signal, and I think they got the message with the B-2 attack.
What do you make of the fact that we haven't heard any confirmation from either Israel or Iran of President Trump's social media post?
Well, if I'm the Israelis, I think I read in your report earlier, Elizabeth, where it was 6 hours until the ceasefire. I'm not going to do anything until that 6 hours is up, and I'm sure They still have targets they're attacking in Iran. And by the way, I know you follow this closely, but I don't think I've ever seen the Iranians say something that's been true or they've ever kept their word. So I'd be a little cautious too.
Yeah, there's a lot coming out of the mouth of the spokesman there that we have a hard time believing. We're also hearing reports that Iran is being run by a bunch of men who are in underground bunkers who won't even use a cell phone. They're using a courier to run back and forth. It's pretty primitive the way they're running this entire thing.
Well, if I were them, I'd probably do the same thing after, since the October 7th, 23 attack on Israel in the Gaza area. Israel has pretty much decimated the axis of evil, if you want to call it that. They've pretty much defeated Hamas. They've defeated Hezbollah. They've degraded the Houthis in the Yemen. And now they've attacked Iran, which has never really been attacked like this before, and now taken out probably most of their nuclear capability. The obliteration part has got to be confirmed, which will take a little time. But after seeing what the United States did on Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan, I think the Iranians have been put way back on this program, potentially 5 to 10 years. And the Israelis, by the way, have done a superb job of getting the area ready for the U.S. to attack, taking out the Iranian S-300 Russian missiles and then other defenses. So, I mean, it's a fabulous historical campaign, if you will. Israel's done a fabulous job. Now the United States putting kind of the cherry on top of the ice cream. It's amazing.
President Trump has said from the very start, he's been saying for 2 decades that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that was the impetus for his launching the strikes 12 days ago to get rid of the nuclear program, although he's now expanded and started and openly pleaded with the Iranian people to rise up and overthrow the Ayatollah. But sticking with the nuclear program, you just said that you think that the stunning success of the American bombing this weekend, of the Israeli campaign for the last 12 days, has set the Iranian nuclear program back at least 5 years, but it hasn't wiped it out completely. We know from satellite imagery that there were trucks lined up taking enriched uranium out of some of these nuclear facilities before we bombed them this weekend. We don't know where that is right now.
Well, first of all, it hasn't been verified, so you're right. I think we should err on the side of caution and believe they still have some of this enriched uranium. But making a nuclear weapon is more than just having enriched uranium. There's a whole bunch of other parts that go into that. First of all, some of their scientists, some of their better ones have been eliminated. There are all kinds of different technical things you have to do to make a uranium into a nuclear weapon. And then you have to have a delivery mode of some sort. So I think they're a ways away from that. They're certainly more than, say, 10 days away from one bomb. And by the way, when we said before where they're 10 days away from one bomb, that's 10 days away from actually forming an uranium capability to put into a nuclear weapon. You've got to form this thing. You have to have a perfect sphere. You have to have a detonator. You have to have a delivery mechanism.
It's hard.
On the other, it's hard to kind of detect a lot of that. And so I think what happened is the right thing. I'm not totally sanguine that we're 100% out of the woods on Iranian nuclear capability, but I feel a lot better today than I did yesterday or the day before.
Yeah, the fear is they'll follow the North Korean route and take the whole thing underground and do it all in secret and emerge, 5, 10 years down the road with their own little nuclear bomb. Very quickly, American bases, military bases throughout the Middle East remain on high alert, even with this posting from President Trump that there's a ceasefire. How long do you think that'll continue? And if Iran has signed on to a ceasefire, does that mean all the proxies and terror cells around the world are signing on to a ceasefire?
No, I wouldn't. On the latter part, I wouldn't put anything past Iranian terrorists or proxies, if you will. So I think that's going to go on for the foreseeable future. We have to be 100% aware. We have to follow our intelligence, have our work there. from the standpoint of the high alert in the bases over there, that's going to remain for a short period of time, maybe a week or two, until we can assure if this is really a ceasefire and they really aren't doing anything. And there's other ways to determine that by movement of weapons, etc. So I think we'll stay on alert for a while. I think, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We're not going to get fooled twice by the Iranians.
I sure hope not. General Chuck Wald, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
All right, coming up for us, there may be a ceasefire, but Americans abroad and at home, should they still be on high alert? The House Intelligence Chair joins me with his biggest concerns when we come back. All right, back to our breaking news coverage of this ceasefire that President Trump just announced within the last hour on social media between Israel and Iran. And he just said on the phone in an interview that it's a great day for America, a great day for the Middle East. I'm happy we got the job done. He said, I think the ceasefire is unlimited, that it's going to go forever. And he added that the war is completely over, saying he does not believe that Israel and Iran will be shooting at each other ever again. That's a very high goal that I think everybody hopes he meets. So if the ceasefire holds, does that mean the threat to Americans is over? It's hard to imagine that Iran, the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism, remember, will tell all of its sleeper cells across the world to just stand down because President Trump has announced a ceasefire. Just yesterday, the State Department, this was actually late last night, the State Department issued a worldwide security alert warning Americans who are traveling abroad to, quote, exercise increased caution. That concern doesn't just go away 12 hours later. With all that said, there will be a lot to discuss at a set of classified briefings for both the House and the Senate tomorrow. They will reportedly be briefed by CIA Director John Ratcliffe and Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard. Joining me now is Congressman Rick Crawford. He is chair of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. He is also a U.S. Army veteran. First, Congressman, I want to get your reaction to President Trump's announcement on social media of this ceasefire. What's your understanding of what it all means? Does this mean we're going to have more negotiations now with Iran to give up its nuclear plans?
I hope so. I hope that's their understanding of it. We certainly would like to follow through on President Trump's vision for Iran to never possess a nuclear weapon. That's been the vision of many presidents for as long as I can remember. And I think we're much closer to realizing that today than we were 72 hours ago. So congratulations on a great effort on the part of the president and his team and our United States military. And then further, capping it off with the ceasefire negotiation, I think also bodes well for the region. But as you suggested in your open, that doesn't necessarily mean that we can just, let down our guard, because there are many proxies of the Iranian regime that may not be bound by that, and certainly aren't bound by that ceasefire agreement.
They may not even be controlled by Iran at this point. We know the Ayatollah is in an underground bunker using couriers to communicate. I can't imagine he's got couriers running over to all parts of Europe or even the United States.
Correct. Well, that's part of the issue here, and why I've raised this many times, is improving our counterintelligence posture here at home. Our CI posture across the federal law enforcement enterprise really needs to redouble their efforts and review, just how effective and how aggressive we are in that space, because what we don't want to see is another, I don't imagine we would ever see another 9/11, anything on that scale, but the potential for terrorist attacks still exists, because we know under the previous administration there were well over 1,000 Iranians allowed into the country. Those are the ones that we know of. We don't know how many gotaways may have been Iranian or affiliated with Iranian terror cells. So we have to be very, very diligent and hypervigilant.
Tomorrow you get your first briefing on all of this from the CIA director and from the DNI, Tulsi Gabbard. Many of your fellow congressmen are questioning how close Iran was to having a nuclear weapon. What questions do you want answered in this big briefing tomorrow?
I think for myself and probably a lot of folks, I think we're going to want to know how much damage was done, how much did we degrade their ability to pursue a nuclear weapon. Those are the things I think are going to be probably expressed by many members, and they'll be concerned about. And then I think we also want to know, how reliable are the Iranians with regard to this ceasefire? We want to make sure that they're going to follow through, and quite frankly, want to make sure that this cessation of hostilities is enduring, and I hope that it is.
Yeah, to your first question tomorrow in this big briefing, Democratic House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffrey says, quote, "There is zero evidence that I've seen that the nuclear program was completely obliterated." Is it too soon to really have any solid intelligence as to what happened? We don't have anybody on the ground there yet.
Right, and that you just answered that question. We don't have anybody on the ground there. And this is going to require human eyes. We can't rely on overhead architecture and image intelligence to be able to tell us everything we need to know with regard to, the damage that was inflicted on those 3 targets. From the overhead images, you would go, okay, yeah, there's seriously been some damage, but we don't know when you're talking about facilities that are 200 meters below the surface,
right?
How much damage was inflicted, despite the effectiveness of those guided bomb units, we still don't know.
Just one last question, Congressman. How concerned are you about a cyber attack from Iran, even with this ceasefire agreement that the president has announced, that Iran and Israel have still yet to confirm? We're waiting any moment to get word of that. Iran has very strong cyber, the ability to do cyber attacks. They're very good at this. How concerned are you about that?
Well, that is one of the areas that I am very concerned with, and we know that they've acted out against things like critical infrastructure, financial institutions, things of that nature that we need to be. When I say hypervigilance, I don't just mean situational awareness where we're out in the public square, we're at an event, we're at a 4th of July celebration or something like that presents an opportunity for a terrorist, but also recognizing cybersecurity and how important it is to be very, very diligent in maintaining a strong cybersecurity across critical infrastructure networks and so on.
Right. These cyber attacks can do a lot of damage. Congressman Rick Crawford, look forward to talking to you after your big intelligence briefing tomorrow. Appreciate you coming on tonight.
All right.
All right, thanks. Coming up, if the airstrikes really are over, does the Iranian regime get to hang on to power, or do the Iranian people have had enough of medieval theocracy for a while? Look at the perspective from inside Iran coming up. And remember, download our NewsNation app for the very latest stories, the top news stories of the night. You can find it, of course, on the Apple App Store and Google Play. It's well known that the Iranian regime is extremely unpopular with the Iranian people. Numerous surveys put opposition to the regime at above 80%. But nobody likes foreign warplanes dropping bombs on their country either. And the IDF is still telling people in specific areas of Tehran to evacuate, despite that ceasefire announcement from President Trump. So what's really the mood of the Iranian people tonight? It's an important question because no matter how many B-2s cloud the skies, no matter how many assassinations the Mossad engineers, if there's ever going to be regime change in Iran, it needs to be the Iranian people who are doing the changing. Joining me now is retired Lieutenant General Mark Schwartz. His last assignment in the military was serving as the U.S. Security Coordinator for Israel and the Palestinian Authority. He's now with the RAND Corporation. Also joining me is Tara Kangarloo. She's the author of the book, The Heartbeat of Iran. It is great to have you both with us. General, I just want to first get your reaction to the news of this ceasefire between Israel and Iran. It was announced by President Trump just about an hour ago. He's been talking about it. Vice President Vance has been talking about it. So far, though, Israel and Iran are not talking about it. Does that make you concerned at all?
Well, I was very, pleased to see this post by the president. I'm not surprised that Iran and Israel have not, come out and said anything because there's ongoing operations right now by the IDF inside of Iran, and I imagine that there's probably operations that are forthcoming from Iran that if over this period of darkness. So I'm not surprised by that, but
okay.
Yep.
So not to worry that we haven't heard from the two parties who are engaged in war and have supposedly agreed to the ceasefire. That is good news because it's big news if this really happens. Tara, I'm just curious about what impact. You're in touch with a lot of people who are in Iran, have connections to people in Iran. What impact do you hear that the bombings by the U.S. this weekend and the potential ceasefire tonight are having on the Iranian people? Will it bolster or damage support for the regime?
Thank you so much for this question and also bringing awareness to the Iranian public. We're talking about 90 million individuals, and quite frankly, some of the most pro-American of societies in that region, and quite frankly, in the world. It's past 3 a.m. in Tehran right now, and I was speaking with a few people who are still up, and I think that itself shows the level of anxiety. These were folks in Tehran, in the north, and also in Isfahan. And I read this last sentence of what President Trump posted, where he said, "God bless Israel, God bless Iran, and God bless the Middle East and the United States." And I think it's probably the first time in history where we see that sentence out there presented to the world. And I got some reactions from the Iranian folks that I've spoken with since that statement came out. And one young woman who fled her home in Tehran just a few days ago and is now in northern Tehran, she told me, she said, it's like a dice that is still spinning, and the Iranian people will not feel joy and true happiness until we see freedom. And that real freedom to almost all Iranians is not at all foreseeable with the current status quo, with the current regime. Elizabeth, many Iranians see the Islamic regime as the source of their agony, whether it's political, economic challenges that they have. They see the regime as the source, and fundamentally, up until now, they believe that the regime is humiliated, and there's nothing more dangerous than an angry, humiliated government.
Tara, do you think that Iranians will rise up this time, sensing that weakness in the regime at this point, the fact that the Ayatollah is in hiding, the fact that so many of the senior leadership has been assassinated? Do you think this will, spark people to rise up, or is there still such brutal terror on these civilians being exerted by the Iranian military police?
At this moment, I think a lot of people are living in fear. We have to remember that 50% of the society lives under the poverty line, not because of lack of education, but because the regime and the government of Iran has created a broken economy topped with sanctions. And over, when Iranian people came out in peaceful protest that we all remember, and I've covered since 2009, the Green Movement, we saw people coming on the streets, sharing their grievances and dissent, and they were cracked down. Last we saw were the 2022 protests over Mahsa Amini's killing. They were quashed and isolated, and so many died and killed and are still in prison. So yes, there is this inherent fear, but also, Elizabeth, the fact that the Iranian people once again fundamentally believe that they're abandoned by the international community. They believe that foreign countries don't have their interests at heart, but rather the interests of their countries and people. And so there's no trust in foreign countries, but also they know that if they go on the streets tomorrow, they will be stifled and they will be choked, because right now, as we're speaking, there are checkpoints along the way on every major streets in Tehran.
And people are being arrested for simply, on allegations of being spies for Israel, and are taken and executed. It's terrible what's going on. General, we also know that Iran still has uranium. Those trucks were seen on these satellite images moving it out of the nuclear facilities a couple of days before the U.S. military hit them with these bunker busters and these Tomahawk missiles from the submarines. They took that uranium someplace. Can they keep it hidden from the U.S. and Israel intelligence?
Well, we saw trucks at Fordo. I'm not sure that
Isfahan as well.
and Isfahan, but I don't think we have verification from the IAEA or from the Israelis that, in fact, the enriched uranium was moved out. I suspect it was, but I haven't seen any reporting that suggests that. So I think the key thing, if we get back to the negotiating table between the United States and Iran, which I'm optimistic, based on what we see transpire, that one of the conditions has got to be verifiable identification and security of that enriched uranium.
Okay.
That's got to be part of the negotiation.
It's a lot to get to. General Schwartz, Tarek Hangerloo, I hope you'll both come back. You have really amazing insights. Fascinating to listen to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, coming up for us, President Trump says Israel and Iran agree to a ceasefire, but we still haven't heard from Israel and Iran. So will it stick? Chris Cuomo joins me live next to discuss. All right, Chris Cuomo joins me now to cover, he's going to take over the coverage of all this breaking news today. Chris, it's hard to imagine just a few hours ago when Iran was lobbing more than a dozen, ballistic missiles at the biggest army base in the Middle East, that President Trump would be announcing a ceasefire. What are you watching for as the clock ticks toward this ceasefire starting? And we, of course, wait for Israel and Iran to confirm it.
Well, that's what you're waiting for, right?
Yeah, right there.
Again, this is the madness that is the Trump administration. This is great news. It would be the biggest win of foreign policy of his administration. If it happens, it would justify the bombing, which has a huge question mark over it because we don't even know what happened after the bombing. Iran saying it moved a lot of its enriched uranium before it. They're liars, but who knows? But this question mark will turn into an exclamation mark if there's an actual ceasefire.
Sure
I don't know why he front ran it like that, but that's Trump. So we're watching and waiting. What I'm doing at the top of the show of unpacking where we are right now.
All right. Nobody better to do it than you. So take it away, Chris. Have a great show.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.